Gather your belongings, they said, that my presence was an inconvenience, that I should stop freeloading and grow up, as my own mother said it, as if I were an unwelcome guest. I stood in the center of the living room, clutching the dish I had just washed. "You've had your fill," she remarked with an air of impartiality. "I don't belong in this house. It is now official, Ryan and Melissa are staying. Perhaps it is time for you to find your life's purpose someplace else." Melissa remained silent. All she did was grin. Ryan. He gave me the silent treatment. They failed to inquire as to my whereabouts for the previous 2 years. The status of the mortgage payment was not inquired about. I neglected to inquire about the source of their continuously increasing grocery budget. I was just expelled. Okay then, because I believed they were in charge, I allowed them to continue. A scream eluded me. I refrained from voicing my objection. I am on my way to my room. Acquired my laptop, these notepads, the binder where I secretly recorded all of my money dealings, including all transfers and bills. Thereafter, I departed. However, prior to that, the accounts were accessed by me. All automatic payments must be disabled. I sent all of the money I had been giving them. Please get back to me. Remember that credit card Mom waved around like a wand. Totally frozen. That electricity bill that Dad was so concerned about before he became ill. Okay, coverage has expired. No note was left by me. Forgot to bid farewell. I desired for them to sense it. That isn't all. However, the complete burden of all that I had silently endured on their behalf until they concluded that I was irrelevant. They foolishly believed they could make it without me. It was me who was responsible for keeping everything together. When I left the room that very second, everything started to crumble. Lauren Mitchell here. As a freelance systems engineer, I'm in my 30s. And what seemed like an unseen bond that prevented my whole family from disintegrating. When my plans in the city fell through 2 years ago, I returned to Sacramento to be with my folks. I was the class leader in computer engineering, had a good career at a San Diego mid-sized business, and was enjoying life until I burnt out to the point that I couldn't recognize myself. Sleepless nights, unrealistic demands, and poisonous supervisors who bragged about how great you were while burying you in the shadows. I floundered. Something made me stop eating. I ceased to slumber. It hit me one morning as I stood in the break room, my eyes fixed on a flashing microwave, that I had no idea how I had ended myself there. Therefore, I resigned. I felt like a total failure when I returned home. However, my parents warmly greeted me, or so I was led to believe. My dad was the first to realize that I had changed. He told me, "You're not broken," as we sat outdoors one day. "You're simply sick of acting like everything is fine." Contrarily, Mom, she was confused. Sure, she made me dinner. "Are you okay?" I responded. However, the inquiries began to change when I began declining job interviews. "Lauren, I was wondering how long you're going to be here. Surely this won't last forever. Are you seriously calling what you do online work these days?" The number of times I presented her with my pay stubs was irrelevant. It made no difference that I had consistent customers all the way from Seattle to Austin. According to her, I wasn't truly working unless I got dressed and clocked into some building each morning. Initial funding came from savings and a small amount from unemployment. In the aftermath, I began taking on smaller freelancing jobs such as fixing outdated systems, fixing networks, and creating scripts for medical data applications. 6 months in my income had surpassed that of my entire tenure at the corporation that had almost destroyed me. My mother remained unmoved by all of that. Dad was the one thing that really mattered. I intervened when his mobility began to deteriorate, assisted him in organizing his schedule, put him medications in a logical order. I took care of his papers and insurance filing, and as his retirement funds began to dwindle, I discreetly made up the shortfall. How much is the energy bill for a fee? Is it for groceries handled? Are you asking about credit cards? Every 2 weeks, I would send money to a joint account that we had set up. For some reason, I refrained from informing Mom. All I did was keep the lights on and the refrigerator stocked. Dad apologized to me. "Is this really going to be too much for you to afford, Lauren?" "Don't be concerned," I would instruct. "There will be a time when this is brief, at least till you regain your composure." In hindsight, I can't tell if I was attempting to reassure him or myself. My oldest brother Ryan was rarely around. He wed Melissa, relocated to San Jose after finishing college, and landed a job at a software company. He made infrequent phone calls, festivals, anniversaries. No one ever once inquired about Dad's health, discontinued offering assistance. I didn't have any animosity against him at that time. I assumed he was preoccupied. He had started over. Perhaps, just perhaps, I was also beginning to construct mine once more. I had customers. Stability was mine. My boundaries were helped back into place when I began seeing a therapist. Time and again, I would rise before the sun came up, brew a pot of coffee, and go to work in my peaceful nook by the window. It looked like even Mom could relax for a little while anyhow. From time to time, she would stop what she was doing and inquire as to what I was messing with. She used to bring me tea occasionally. However, her skepticism was generally unwavering. Isn't it missing having actual coworkers? Isn't it solitary trying to get things done on your own? You're not merely vanishing into thin air, are you? To her, it didn't matter how far I got. I was still just a girl in her bedroom, playing pretend by typing on her laptop. But I persisted. Thanks to my dad, I always thought families stayed together. Additionally, I believed in my heart that if I simply continued to give, if I could just demonstrate time and time again that I was valuable, reliable, and adequate, in due time people would perceive me in the manner I desired. I had no idea. My identity had already been determined by them. It was completely unrelated to reality. So on the appointed day, Ryan and Melissa showed up unannounced at our doorstep, clutching luggage and feigning a smile. Nothing tipped me off. At this time, no. It wasn't until I met my mother's gaze and beheld a chilly object. One last thing, something that conveyed its message verbally. This house is no longer yours. The sound of Melissa's rolling luggage dragging across the wooden floor is one I'll never forget. Like a warning bell, it rang out throughout the corridor. Isn't it wonderful to have everyone in the family reunited? Then she chirped. She seemed so convincing, and I wanted to believe her. But something about her grin felt played out, as if she were putting on a show. When I needed an embrace, Ryan refrained. Not even a polite greeting was extended by him. After a brief glance and half nod, I brought the boxes into the guest room, which is where I do most of my work. That evening, I inquired about the situation with Mom, and she pretended to be startled that I was perplexed. "Honey, all Ryan and Melissa need is a temporary place to stay. It has been difficult for them. Where will they find a place to rest? So you're doing remote work, aren't you? You aren't, as if the guest room were important. You can find a better place to fit." My workplace was transformed into a closet for them in an instant. I found my books in a box. My chalkboard disappeared. Squished between the water heater and the washing machine is my workstation. Screaming was on my mind, but that was not the case for me. Contrarily, I chewed on my tongue, yet again. Reason being, I had mastered that skill. Like she was barging in on a fraternity party, the following morning, Melissa pounded on my door at precisely 7 in the morning. "Are you still in bed?" She raised her voice and shouted, "Yes, I am. It's my job. You can't expect breakfast to just appear, can you?" With just half of the code put on my screen, I squinted in frustration at the wall front of me. I said, "I thought we were just doing our own thing for breakfast," attempting to maintain my composure. We're related. We need to be lending a hand to one another. Thus, I prepared breakfast. Nothing fancy, just some toast eggs, sausage coffee, and some fresh strawberries I got the day before. In an effort to diffuse the situation, I set the table. "Not at all. Is this it?" Ryan made a dismissive noise. "No hot cakes? Is there no bacon?" A scowl spread across Melissa's face. "On the whole, I don't mind. It's just different than my usual." I drew a long breath. "You are under no obligation to consume it if it is of poor quality." I thought I smacked them. They were staring at me in shock. "I don't understand the attitude." A rising tone came from Ryan as he said, "You're too good to cook breakfast, and you've been living here for free for years. The bills for Dad's medical care, the electricity, the food, Oh, please," Melissa cut in. "You do most of your work on your laptop. It's not the same as having a regular job." For the first time, I understood they weren't simply complaining. They were making concerted efforts to undo all of my work. "Where does Mom stand unmoved?" She continued to sip her coffee, opposed to my defense, leaving them uncorrected. I mean, come on, consenting to its occurrence. I was trapped in the hallway that night by Ryan. "We're doing our best to get this home running smoothly again for Mom. She could need some help, and to be honest, you've been somewhat dramatic as of late. You mean intense, right?" With his arms folded, he gave a silent endorsement. "Feelings aren't what make a difference. Closed off and continuously functioning. Everyone else's health is suffering as a result. For emotional reasons as well, I became a burden. It wasn't just that my art was fake. I was fake too. During one of my trips to the recovery center, I attempted to broach the subject with Dad. With wide eyes filled with worry, he listened intently. "I was completely unaware," he said. "Lauren, I apologize. I had no idea things had escalated to that point. I simply cannot fathom how I was rendered deserving of this," I said. "Mr. President, you did nothing wrong," he whispered. "It may be time to quit attempting to change the thoughts of those who have already decided how they feel about you. Actually considering the possibility of perhaps he had a point." From then on, things only became worse. Melissa began to dump her responsibilities on me when I failed to complete the tasks assigned to her. Dishes accumulated. For days, the refuse lay beside the entrance. Mom began publicly supporting her. She would quietly say, "At least Melissa tries to help around here." Even though I was the one who was supposed to be cleaning the countertops and refilled the fridge, even in my own house, they made me feel like an afterthought. I paid the bills anyhow. Insurance was my responsibility. In response to my father's prescription issues, I contacted the medical facility. The question of who was in charge of those matters was never raised. They thought everything would just fall into place. Then the day arrived when they officially announced it. As the sun dipped below the tree line, I returned home from a stroll. Headphones plugged in. I could almost hear Ryan's voice as I opened the door. She will remain until we force her to leave, he declared. And your mom is already on board, Melissa said. Tomorrow she promised to speak with her. Very well, her opportunity has passed. No, I didn't stroll in. My grip on my phone grew tighter as I remained still in the hallway, shoes still on. My eviction was going to be enforced by them. I continued to rush away from the home, leaving behind the life I had started over. I remember sitting in the dark that night, looking at my ceiling all by myself. I felt a change within, not melancholy, not dread. Put an end to it. I devoted 2 years to fitting in with a family that never saw the worth in me. I had persevered, quite generous, kind. They made use of that generosity. Returned the saliva to my mouth. Oh, and there was something else they completely overlooked. I was told I had no electricity. They failed to remember who had control over the funds that were keeping this home solvent. I grinned the following morning, got the kitchen in order. The towels were folded, invented a new pancake recipe as well. Afterwards, that same day, I began to turn off all of the systems. At first, it went unnoticed. It was that aspect that caught me off guard. I sat at the library's computer with my headphones on, thinking I was coding, while my fingers gracefully traced across financial screens. I had set up everything in the previous year, everything that keeps that home afloat financially, including all of the shared accounts, automated transfers, and subtle duct tape. The deeds were all in my name. You have my routing numbers, codes that I use. Consequently, I began unraveling the strands. Then another, my mother's credit card, which she treated like an infinite gift from above, was the first item I disabled. Merchandise from internet stores sent weekly. Appointments in the salon. Vegetarian and organic food that I have never eaten. I disabled autopay and temporarily disabled the card. After this, the conveniences. Subtly and monthly, nobody had ever suspected a thing I had been paying them straight out of my bank account. Accordingly, I terminated the automatic payments. Give them the initial notification of being late. Give them permission to ponder what changed. After that, the shared grocery bill arrived. I emptied it of all its funds and sealed it. The icing on the cake. I transferred Dad's emergency medical fund, the real one, not the one they used for domestic nonsense, to a separate savings account in his name where no one else could access it but him and me. Nobody else had any idea it was there. At the day's conclusion, I had turned on every light. They began to take note at the weekend's close. The kitchen was the origin of the initial explosion. As the ground shook under their feet, I remained in the home, remaining calm and silent. Melissa squealed with delight as she opened the refrigerator. Why was the grocery order not delivered? We've run out of everything. The living room was interrupted by Mom's voice. That drugstore didn't take my credit card. For my vitamins, I had to shell out hard cash. I don't understand. I took a seat at the table and sipped my coffee. I said with a neutral tone, I am not sure. It could be a good idea to contact the bank. I was approached by Ryan that night. His expression betrayed his bewilderment and fear. Were the accounts handled by you? For what reason is the internet bill past due? You mentioned that I was a burden, Ryan. I confided in him, locking gaze with him. I ceased to be one, therefore. Blinking occurred to him. What on earth are you saying? Your lifestyle, Mom's shopping, and this house's costs have all been taken care of by me. The whole thing. I worked for 2 years, ever after Dad fell ill. Yet it seems my services are no longer required thus. I retreated. Trapped, he remained still. You're not telling the truth, Melissa said from behind him, her legs crossed. Please review the statements I stated in a composed manner. Just do it. The names on each deposit will be visible to you. Indeed they were, and their expressions priceless even after canceling a food package and Amazon box. Mom subsequently replied, her voice barely audible. I had no idea. You didn't inform me that you were the one doing all that. Sure I did. You simply refused to believe me. As usual, I was up bright and early the next morning. Finished brewing the coffee. Stuffed my belongings. Finally, once and for all, the kitchen counter is where I stashed my key. Deactivated the thermostat. Silently left them all behind. I didn't notice. I don't understand. The power of quiet cannot be underestimated. Across town, I settled into a little one-bedroom apartment. Plain old walls, a used couch, and a collection of mismatched dishes, nothing flashy. But I owned it, peaceful, make it spotless, stay calm, absolutely no passive-aggressive language, nothing to be ashamed of. An authentic familial unit. Also, after all these years, my chest felt lighter. Work was my major emphasis. Clients became aware of the change. I refocused my efforts. My spirits rose. Gaining employment on more lucrative projects such as audits of network security and eye integrations was my new normal. Within 4 months, my income had doubled. It seemed inevitable, though, that they would eventually come knocking. The fact is that they were completely unaware of how reliant on me they would eventually grow. They thought everything was automatic, that the electricity would be maintained. There would be no empty fridge space. As if by magic, the debts would disappear. Their magician had been me. Finally, I had stepped off the stage. With that being said, when Ryan contacted, I gave it a ring. 3 times, exactly 4. Curiosity triumphed in the end. Lauren, who is she? He had a raspy voice, hesitant. I know we haven't communicated much since you departed, but we're experiencing some problems, financially. You may have been more helpful than we gave you credit for, I suppose. Silence was mine, held my breath. My mom has been spending money as normal, but it's starting to add up. Melissa and I are unable to afford the mortgage, and I was unable to access the internet this morning. The word, oh no, from my lips with a hint of cynicism. Yeah, he said, totally disregarding the tone. So we were thinking, would it be possible for you to transfer some money, basically so we can get back on course, right? It was almost comical. Ryan, I put in a ton of time and effort while you pretended I didn't exist. Despite her insults, I paid for your wife's breakfast. Mom said I was lazy, and I made sure she wore her luxury shoes the whole time. Now you're asking for assistance. No sound. He mumbled something about how he had no idea you were involved in all that. Then you didn't want to know, did you? Listen, I made a mistake. Everyone did. But things are becoming dicey now. Oh, please, for the time being at least. After that, I took a pause, subsequently articulated it. At peace, quite evident. Firm as rock. No, I interrupted him just as he was about to argue. I've had enough of resolving issues for invisible individuals. I made an excessive sacrifice. By all accounts, you preferred that I leave. This is your chance to experience life apart from me. I cut the call short. The number was blocked, and I reclined. I savored my tea. I grinned. Everything fell apart in a matter of days, not weeks. At least it wasn't my aim to follow them. However, minor details persisted. My former next-door neighbor sent me a message to check in and see if everything was all right when he noticed the utility company's truck outside. An email that had been forwarded from an earlier insurance notification which was still associated with my name, informed me that the homeowner's policy was now past due. The subsequent call was by phone number 2. It was Mom this time. She remained silent throughout. Her voice sounded like it was about to burst through the speaker, full with panic and anxiety. "It was your brother who accused you, Lauren, of canceling all the payments. The house is in a state of disrepair. The expenses—" I took a moment to respond, just stood there silent. At last she spoke out again, saying, "I had no idea it was you. I had no idea." Everyone didn't realize, and that became the theme. "You believed I was idly doing nothing," I whispered. "I remained up late doing math, but you didn't see it. It seemed like every time something went wrong, it was magically repaired. Your father, he has stopped sending us anything," she muttered. "He said he's had enough of being held accountable for those who allow you to endure such pain." Ugh, I felt that. My dad had always been the peacemaker and the silent one. However, it seemed like even he had hit a ceiling. His move-in with a church buddy occurred after I departed. Someone capable of assisting him with the necessary physical treatment. Not to mention, someone who wasn't my mom. Separation papers had been filed by him. That he had given it that much thought for so long was news to me. "He won't be returning," Mom remarked, her voice betraying her disbelief. "I am to be independent," he said. "Do you think that's true?" With the passage of time, I chose not to answer. I didn't feel the need to express myself. However, I wished she would just sit in silence for a change. She finally snapped once again. "This is our last chance, Lauren. I am unsure of the solution." Ryan was laid off. Melissa departed. Just recently, she packed everything and returned to Arizona to live with her sister. "I just can't stand it," she said. I was about to choke. He was left by Melissa. Ryan, she said, was careless, and that she had never agreed to be subjected to such intense scrutiny. That he wasn't who she had imagined him to be. His life, he was not. Then why was it even necessary? Mom persisted. "No one is employing someone with my background, no matter how hard I look. Debt is mounting. Creditors are contacting you. I had no idea that so much of this was associated with me." Her sobs faded off, and for an instant alone, I felt a part of myself relax. Even now, this woman was my mom. She was the one who took care of my lunches in middle school, prepared me soup when I was sick, and would sing to herself while she folded laundry. I couldn't help but think about the expression on her face as she stood behind Ryan and urged me to get out of there, as if I were an unwelcome guest, a renter who had remained too long. Speaking in a composed manner, I expressed my apologies for your discomfort. However, at this moment in time, I am unable to come to your aid. Everything I attempted was previously undertaken. You guys made it very obvious that I was not welcome. Unconcerned, she submitted, refused to beg. Her sole expression was a sigh of relief. This wearied, drawn-out sigh that sounded like remorse after 30 years. Her call ended there. Afterwards that week, I met up for coffee with Jessica, who has been my best friend since we were in high school, and has been one of the only individuals who has ever had faith in me. I spilled the beans to her, detailed account, starting with the freelancers to the deceit, in the monetary demise of those who had saw me as expendable. It was her suggestion that you put pen to paper. No joke, stories like yours are needed by the public. With that, I proceeded, avoiding making them feel bad about themselves, rather of seeking vengeance. However, to let it go, my essay is complete. Articles named "The Invisible Daughter Who Paid for Everything" are lengthy and comprehensive. On Medium, I went undercover to publish it. not mentioning any names, concealed their whereabouts. This is the reality. It detonated. The news became trending after a few days. A deluge of notes arrived. While keeping everything together behind the scenes, many recounted their own tales of being exploited, discarded, and forced from their homes. A podcaster in my area contacted me to see if I would be interested in being a guest speaker. I turned down the interview. Nonetheless, I did consent to have them air the narrative. At that very moment, the TEDx Sacramento organizers emailed me. They didn't want me to reveal who my family was. I was asked to talk about limits by them, regarding one's value to oneself, regarding the significance of reclaiming one's power after having relinquished it over one's lifetime. Initially, I was hesitant. Then I remembered the night I'd listened to my own family plot my escape from the house I'd been secretly rescuing while sitting in the dark. So I agreed. The auditorium's lighting was warm and inviting on the night of the event. I took the platform, my voice unwavering despite a little tremor in my palms. And word got out. The individuals who claim to love you aren't always the ones who end up hurting you the most. That when you don't set limits on your compassion, it might backfire on you. Furthermore, quitting is not a sign of weakness. It's the first step towards honoring oneself. After I finished speaking, there was a little hush in the room. Then the round of applause began. Certainly not a rumble, the sort that evokes a sense of healing, though, to feel like you're finally getting seen. An elderly woman then came up to me, an emotional woman. "You made my story known," she remarked. However, the terms to describe it have eluded me. I grinned, feeling a surge of energy in my chest that I hadn't had for quite some time. No war, a state of complete tranquility, the kind of peace you pray for while you're underwater. However, the kind that is derived from having knowledge. That was a lifesaver. A buddy wasn't Jessica at all. A lifeline she was. Since our junior year of high school, we had known one other. This is the type of friendship that lasts through everything from breakups to jobs to awkward periods to years of silence that are miraculously followed by a seamless return to the conversation. I contacted her immediately upon leaving the residence permanently. What I required was completely unclear to me. The thought of sitting in such quiet by myself was unbearable. It took 2 rings before she picked up. "Are you all right?" The word no from my lips as my voice quivered. "I will come and retrieve you." 15 minutes after that, she arrived wearing a sweatshirt, holding 2 iced coffees and exuding an air of tranquility that was like a comforting blanket on a chilly night. A lot of explanation was unnecessary. No specifics were elicited from her. Effortlessly perched in the passenger seat, I gazed out the window as she skillfully guided the vehicle. I was allowed to spend the night at her apartment by her. Next up. All right, this is beginning to feel like college again, except now you actually have money, she exclaimed as she strode in with a plate of pancakes on the 4th morning after I had transformed a corner of her sunroom into a small improvised office. We couldn't help but laugh harder than necessary. I was never made to feel like I was an inconvenience by her. I felt like no one ever saw my damaged state. I have always believed in the validity of my work, my suffering, and my choices. After I mentioned that I was considering moving out on my own, she gave me a meaningful nod. "You ought to. Take your time, go at your own pace, discover a place that truly embodies your essence." She became quite excited when I informed her that my goal was to establish something bigger. Perhaps launch my own business, consolidate all the contracts I was handling into a legitimate brand. "It's been years since you started. It is high time that people took notice of what you were accomplishing. Name ideas were facilitated by her. She went over my presentation slides. Specifically, she put me in touch with a prior customer who was in need of my network systems upgrade knowledge and linked me with them. 3 additional jobs came out of that one. I was soon submitting papers for an LLC, purchasing online domains, creating bills using Northlight Systems, my new business name. Free of charge, Jessica created the logo. She said it made her think of how no matter how bad things seemed, I could always find a path forward. My previous corporate work paid less than what I earned in the first 3 months. It wasn't only financial considerations, though. The question of ownership arose. Freedom. Being certain that I owned every client system and piece of code that I created. Whenever positive things occurred, Jessica was the one I contacted first. She also calmed me down when I had my initial panic episode in the new flat, when I was startled by the sudden silence and realized I was all by myself. It remained broken. I was simply reminded by her that being alone doesn't imply forsaken. At times, it signifies ultimately being safe. I couldn't shake it. It does still. When I reflect on how I got through the darkest part of my life, in the future, it won't simply be the pain of loss and betrayal that will come to mind. So, I'll bet on her couch just next to mine, a couple of cups of coffee, no criticism, being there. Evidently, not every love has to be reciprocated. You don't have to explain yourself to certain individuals. They perceive you just for who you are, plus they remain. Originally, it was a diary entry. It was only a means to release the burden I had been bearing. I was going to keep it to myself. Even then, I had my doubts, but the words came out in a torrent more quickly than I could type them. Line after line of the truth that had been ingested for an excessive amount of time. On the day they informed me to depart, I documented it. Despite them treating me like wallpaper, I paid the bills, nursed the quiet, and kept my head down. I documented their gaslighting dismissals and smiling while they removed me from my own existence. How I faded into oblivion until their loss was directly proportional to my disappearance. Upon completion, I remained seated, fixated on the screen. There are a whopping 12 pages, raw, without filtering. The keyboard felt as sticky as blood. It was reread by me, revised somewhat. Then, using the alias Daughter in Shadow, I went ahead and pushed publish on Medium. I was underwhelmed. Only a handful of people will read it. 2 or 3 remarks. However, more than 30,000 people viewed the post in only 48 hours. A couple Facebook support groups for adult children alienated from toxic families. Reddit's woes, chores, True Off My Chest, and Twitter had all reposted it before the week's conclusion. Although the remarks first destroyed me, they eventually put me back together again. This story is also mine. I was convinced I was going mad until I perused this. Yesterday, I departed from my mother's residence. I believed I was all by myself. There were others. It wasn't any of us. A producer from the podcast The Unheard Ones emailed me sometime between the 4th and 5th day. She wanted to know whether I would be open to having someone read my essay. No visuals, only sound. I could maintain using the alias, complete secrecy. No, I nearly said no. But then I thought about all the thousands of individuals who may relate to what I said. The one who required authorization to depart. People were holding their breath for evidence that self-defense wasn't selfish. Because of it, I made a recording of it. I read the entire piece while huddled in my bedroom, with the mic that Jessica had lent me, my voice quivering, my breath seizing and my palms sweaty. However, I managed to overcome it. Tuesday was the airing date of the program. My Alias account's inbox was full by Thursday. Therapist messages, learners in higher education, parents who have gone through a divorce, nurses, technical experts, reports of people who spent a great deal of time and energy attempting to save relationships that were hopelessly flawed, according to what one woman wrote. In the parking lot of the grocery store, I sat in my car and listened to your story. Because I was inconsolable, I stayed outside. You have spoken what I could never articulate when I realized that my experience had become part of a larger narrative. It belongs to every kind spirit that continued giving till they could offer no more. A nearby college invited me to speak to a sociology class that was researching contemporary family relations later that month. It seemed odd to step foot in a classroom and realize that my work had been included into the curriculum. They probed with perceptive inquiries. A few of them related stories from their lives. One of the girls lingered after school and said, "I intend to depart soon. My heart is racing. I believe I'll be all right now, though." Glassy eyes betrayed my nod. I could put myself in that person's shoes since I understood the feeling just like it. The message kept getting out there. Some media requested to reprint it as well. My only stipulation was that they retain the original title. The day they fell apart from me was the day they lost all that I had given them. Occasionally a person does make contact. Thank you notes aren't always necessary. On occasion, people have asked me how I realized I needed to distance myself, and my response is always the same: just wait for it to happen. As soon as you realize you can't rely on their comprehension, finds its fulfillment when one attains self-awareness. This whole ordeal has taught me one thing: love isn't love unless it has limits. This is boundage. For a long time, I thought that keeping to myself was the mark of a good daughter. Being accessible, putting others before myself even when it drained me. I foolishly believed that people would notice me if I only offered a little. Show me some respect, recognize my worth. However, the reality is, what is freely given to others is not always appreciated, particularly when they believe it is their rightful place. They referred to me as family. However, they viewed me as a mere asset, an alternative, a silent mechanism that maintained operations so they could maintain the pretense that everything was all right. Their smiles faded as soon as I ceased contributing. They said I had an attitude when I spoke up. I was accused of being callous when I departed. I wasn't cold-hearted, though. My emotions were all over the place: hurt, letdown, and the realities I couldn't deny. Drawing a line was my next step. Myself became my top focus, which was a first for me. I wish I had known it sooner. That is the first lesson: clarity, not harshness, is the goal of setting limits. To prove my love for you, I refuse to let you break me. The message reads, "From a distance, I can love you," it says, quite secure. Now for the second rule: being indispensable is not a prerequisite for dignity. If you realize your value, it doesn't matter if other people acknowledge it or not. I used to think I was meaningless unless I had something to offer. I was failing miserably if I couldn't keep everyone in my orbit together. Now that I know, when other people choose to ignore your worth, it doesn't mean it goes away. Demonstrating your humanity is not required of you. It is essential that you respect it. At long last, you may reinvent yourself at any age, at every stage of life, and regardless of how far off you are from your past self. Starting a business wasn't in my plans. Being an advocate for others was never in my plans. All I wanted was serenity. From there, I constructed everything else. Rest isn't a state of mind. It's not about wishing for better treatment from strangers in a room. Things are happening, intention. Keeping choosing yourself even when it hurts again and time again. Now when I wake up, I am in my own place. People that work with me value my abilities. When I'm hungry, I eat. As soon as I feel the need to relax, I do so. I have not had someone pound on my door requesting breakfast. Nobody ever doubts the veracity of my work. On occasion, the stillness seems more deafening than the mayhem I departed from. But I have found myself in that stillness, not the me they sought to diminish, the daughter who cannot be seen. But I now complete, unadulterated, and unstoppable. Therefore, if you are perusing this, when you strive to keep it all together, you end up feeling inadequate, unloved, and completely drained. I beg you to pay attention. Peace is yours without condition. If staying there is destroying your soul, you don't need anybody's okay to go out of there. Furthermore, quitting does not indicate weakness. Liberation is yours. My little balcony is bathed in light as the sun gently rises over Santa Barbara's waterways. And I stand there every morning, coffee in hand, taking a deep intake of the sea air as if it were evidence that freedom tastes good. My dad, Gerald, has finally found a peaceful assisted living home surrounded by towering redwoods, and I make the weekly trek north to visit him. Everyone in the nursing staff knows my name. They greet me with waves and joke that he has a whole different expression every time he hears my footsteps down the corridor. Every time we visit, he puts off tending to the garden. Hummingbirds flitter about us as we sit side by side on a weathered bench, and he flashes me that big, kind smile I thought I'd never see again. Although he continues to have some discomfort in his joints and struggles with treatment on sometimes the darkness that had previously obscured his vision has lifted and he is filled with a newfound sense of optimism. We cover every topic imaginable. The business I recently joined, his online lecture series, and the unexpected turns life takes after 70. Sometimes there's just the two of us, and that's okay. In such moments, there's no stress, no criticism, and we both know that love can be genuine even when it hurts. His hand firmly grasps mine as I go. On each and every occasion, he consistently adds, "Proud of you, kid," as evidence that something lovely did escape the devastation. I keep those words close to my heart like a warm stone. When I get back to my place, I turn on my laptop and see the light of impending projects. The website that Jessica redesigned is now online. Northlight Systems is doing well, and I'm getting more questions than I can answer. Once again, work is no longer a prison, but an exciting experience. Peace isn't the lack of noise, but rather the presence of choice, which I experience when I stroll the beach in the evenings without my phone, with my feet naked and the sound of the waves caressing my ankles. My pick, on a daily basis. Voices shouted, doors slammed, and the exact moment they instructed me to leave the old house occasionally creep into my mind. As soon as I allow such visions to form, I observe them vanishing like pieces of driftwood washed away by the sea. They have lost all control over me. Currently, my possessions consist of the sound of my own heartbeat every time I sign an email, the laughter of new acquaintances, and the rhythm of my breath while running along Cabrillo Boulevard in the mornings. My name is Lauren Mitchell, and I am the founder. Repeatedly little noises that reassure you that you survived and are safe at home. Locking myself in for the night with the lights dimmed and the window ajar, I welcome the ocean air. Amidst the quiet, I murmur a vow to myself and to the girl who believed she needed to make everyone happy before they would love her. This time, I assure her it will be different. From this point forward, we will select joy. The waves outside remain calm and unruffled, and I imagine that my dad is sound asleep, daydreaming about things that don't worry him. I'm satisfied. That concludes everything.